We'd like to welcome all of you to today's special broadcast. We are very pleased to have in our presence to be interviewed by the Black Press of America today, the president and the CEO of the American Petroleum Institute, API. I've known Mike Sommers for some time now, and I just want to say to the audience before we get into the interview, if all of corporate America will have a president and CEO like Mike Sommers, I think we would be much better shape in the country. In fact, if I ever get a chance to see President Trump, I'm going to recommend Mike Sommers to handle his situation so we can get ourselves out of this epidemic. But Mike, welcome to the Black Press. We appreciate the relationship between API and the NNPA. And we have listeners now across the United States, in all 50 states, eager to hear this interview. So right up front, Mike, tell us about the American Petroleum Institute, who you represent, the industries you represent, and give us something of the demographic makeup so that as we discuss the API, people will know the industry that you represent.
Thank you. Dr. Chavis, it is such an honor to be with you today. It really is my privilege to be here, particularly among your presence. You have been such an inspiration to me over many, many years. Even before we met, you've been an inspirational figure in my life. And I want to thank you for everything that you've done to advance this country, from your time working with Dr. Martin Luther King to your leadership of the NAACP and, of course, the Million Man March. And now, of course, your role as president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, which, of course, represents the Black press in the United States. It is truly my honor, and I draw inspiration from you for everything that you've done throughout your career. And thank you for this opportunity to be with you today. Of course, during this pandemic, we face huge energy challenges as a nation. And we can't solve them without employing the very best minds to solve the world's problems and develop global solutions. So again, Dr. Chavis, thank you for your partnership and your leadership. And I'm excited about our time together today.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And of course, a lot of people in our community have heard about API. They've heard about the American Petroleum Institute, and they've heard something of the gas and oil industry. But give us a little bit more in-depth about the organization itself, the American Petroleum Institute.
You bet. Thank you. So the American Petroleum Institute is an organization that does two things. First, we advocate for the industry itself in Washington, D.C. and in state capitals. So we spend a lot of our time working with regulators, with policymakers, with the administration, no matter who the administration is, to advance the oil and gas industry. And that's probably what most of your viewers know about API. But in addition to being the organization that represents oil and gas in Washington and throughout the world, we're also an organization that is the worldwide standard setter for the oil and gas industry. In fact, this organization was founded 101 years ago, really as an organization built to ensure that the industry follows the same standards. So let me give you one example of that. So if you pick up a bottle of motor oil at Walmart or any other store, there's an API seal on that bottle of motor oil, which signifies that it was manufactured to API standards. In addition to that, we do standards in health, environment, and safety in particular. These are areas which are very important to American consumers and to the oil and gas industry. So we want to make sure that our industry stays safe and that we're doing it in a way that keeps our communities safe in particular, but also to make sure that we're keeping our environment safe as well. So half of API, and in fact, what most people in the oil and gas industry know API for, are those key standards that keep the environment, our health, and our communities safe. So we're proud to maintain those over 700 standards for the oil and gas industry. The other thing that we're known for, of course, is our advocacy on behalf of the industry. And we're proud to represent a great industry which represents over 10 million American workers in our American economy.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. when President Clinton was president, I served on the President's Commission on Sustainable Development.
Mm-hmm.
And there was always this sort of debate between the economists and the environmentalists. So my question to you is, from your unique perspective at API, representing the oil and gas industry in America, how do you see this issue now that has emerged about climate change? You've mentioned in your opening remarks that you do care about the environment. You, in fact, have a lot of policies and standards that you've raised to keep the environment safe. But a lot of people are not aware of that. So broadly speaking, we can get in more in depth, but broadly speaking, what is your perspective on climate change and environmental protection?
Well, thank you very much for asking that question, because it is one of the most important issues of our time. To address the key issue of climate change. At API, we as an organization recognize that climate change is real and that man and humans are contributing to a changing climate. But the other key component of this is we also know that oil and gas are going to play a key role in our energy future for many, many years to come. So we're focused on making sure that our industry is doing everything that we can to address this societal problem that needs to be addressed both at a government level and at an individual company level. If you'd like to learn more about API's climate change policies, you can actually go to our website at api.org and click on climate change so you can see how seriously we take this issue. We take it very seriously because we know it is one of the biggest existential issues that we're going to have to deal with over the course of the next many, many decades. But in addition to that, we know that this industry needs to continue to improve our environmental footprint. One way that we've done that, and it was really a technological advancement, is because of the United States being now the #1 producer of natural gas in the world. Natural gas has replaced coal as the #1 power source for American consumers. And what that has meant is that because natural gas is so much cleaner, 50% cleaner than coal, the United States today has the lowest emissions of any developed country, and we have the lowest emissions that we've seen in a generation in the United States. And we're proud of that. You know, that wasn't something that a government told the industry to do. It was really because of innovation in our industry, and we're really proud that we now today see a cleaner environment as a consequence of American innovation and American ingenuity.
Well, that's a very important fact that you are sharing with us, Mike. And I was just thinking, you mentioned earlier about the APIs, the industry is over 100 years old. This is the 193rd year of the Black Press of America.
Wow.
And one of the things about having institutions that are well-rooted, deeply invested in the evolution of our society, I think it's good that we're having this discussion because you're providing some actual facts about some key issues that I think we need to always keep at least our readers, and not only for Black Americans, I would say for all Americans, to be involved in how, in fact, the gas and oil industry is contributing to a better environment, a safer environment. Now, I also know that you have invested heavily in new technology. Can you share with our viewers across the country the importance of innovation, the importance of technology? And I'm going to come back and ask you about workforce development because you mentioned that you got all these people employed. I'm sure a lot of because of pandemic, we have a lot of unemployment in our community. Absolutely. And people who are very trained may be looking for second and third career paths to try to sustain their families. But overall, I want to go back to technology. Talk us about some of the new technology that the API and the member companies that make up the American Petroleum industry, gas and oil industry. Give us a sort of an overview of innovation and technology.
Of course. So I want to start with foundational technology, which is a technology that really came on into significant prominence within the last 10 years, which is hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling. So this is a technology, hydraulic fracturing in particular, that's been used for many, many years, but it's really been perfected over the course of the last 10 years. And this is a way that the United States is able to extract more oil and gas than we ever have before. In fact, pre-pandemic, the United States became the #1 producer of both oil and natural gas in the world. And also, we're the number one producer of refined products in the world, which means chemicals and gasolines. So we're proud of the impact that we have in the United States and the American energy leadership that has come as a consequence of this innovation. But what has that really meant for Americans? Well, what it's meant is that energy prices continue to go down. And I think many of your viewers will note that while everything else in life seems to get more expensive year on year. So if you think about the fact that healthcare costs have gone up 75% in the last 10 years, rent and housing costs have gone up by a third. Even food costs have gone up by a third in the last 10 years. Household energy costs have actually gone down 14.7% in the last 10 years alone. And that is because of American energy leadership and the fact that the United States is now the number one producer of oil and natural gas and refined products. And that's something that a lot of Americans should be proud of, that American energy leadership, because it's continuing to drive down costs for all Americans. So we're very proud of that. We know that there's a climate challenge, as you noted at the top of this discussion, and we're investing in new technologies to address that issue too. It is my view, with as divided as our government is right now, that this industry needs to step up and take ownership of these issues to ensure that we're addressing this big climate challenge. So one of the ways that we're doing that, there are unprecedented investments going on right now in an innovation called carbon capture, utilization, and storage technologies. And this is a way where the industry is investing to remove carbon from the atmosphere or capture it before it ever gets to the atmosphere, and then store it in a safe place so that this industry can continue to produce in a way that reduces the carbon footprint of our country. The United States right now is the number one investor in CCUS technology from an industry perspective. And I'm pleased to say that the federal government is finally getting its act together and investing in these technologies as well. The most recent tax bill that was enacted by Congress provided incentives for CCUS technologies. And we expect that future Congresses will also start investing in this technology as well, because it is the way that we're going to be able to power our economy going forward, while ensuring that Americans continue to have access to reliable and affordable energy, which is really what Americans are demanding from our economy today.
Everybody is in the news today about the situation in California.
Yes.
The devastating forest fires, and of course, many scientists, link the climate change issue to some of the change in the weather patterns, severe hurricanes, the water shelf. I think there was a recent report about a big glacier melt in the North Pole. But what I want to ask you, I think that what you're reporting is the good impact of now the United States being an energy producer, but at the same time reducing harm to the environment. And I think sometimes when people hear about the profitability of the industry, they don't hear enough about, well, you can have a good business and also take care of the environment at the same time. Or you can put a stress on taking care of the environment without injuring good business. I think that's really what sustainability means. It's not overly letting the pendulum go to just one side of this discussion, but having some middle ground where we can protect the environment at the same time have good business practices. And it seems to me, I think I would like for you to share what of all the business practices that you've learned about how to protect the environment and also how to keep the industry profitable. Well, just share with us what you think some of those best practices have been from what your own experience has seen.
Yeah, I think as we talked about at the top, that we know that climate change is real and we have to address this issue. It is a societal issue. We can't address it alone. We also have to address it on a global basis, and we're committed to doing that. This is an industry that for many, many years, for all of its existence, has been transitioning and changing to meet the changing society needs. We like to talk about this from the perspective of what we call the Energy Trilemma, that any energy source has to meet this trilemma, that energy has to be affordable, it has to be reliable, so it's there when you need it, but it also has to be cleaner. And this is an industry that is really focused on meeting that trilemma every single day. Let me give you an example of one way, and you talked about a best practice that we could pursue. So here at API, we have a program called the Environmental Partnership. The Environmental Partnership is a program that brings together small producers and large producers, and the whole goal is to make sure that we're reducing methane emissions in our operations. This program has had tremendous success. Again, it's not a program that the government has asked us to pursue. It is a program that we know that we need to pursue to reduce methane emissions, which is a potent greenhouse gas. So this industry is stepping up to the plate and making sure that we're reducing those methane emissions in oil fields to ensure that we're improving our environment. That's not even to mention the incredible benefits that have come from, as I mentioned earlier, that switch from coal to natural gas, which has really led to almost all of the environmental improvements that we've seen over the course of the last decade. So it's an exciting time to be in this industry, and I'm proud to represent an industry that is so forward-thinking and really focused on meeting that trilemma of affordable, reliable, and cleaner.
Well, thank you. That's good news. Already, Mike, I was going to tell you, I'm looking at the chat board. A lot of questions are coming in from around the United States, and I just want to say to all the viewers, and particularly those of you who have posed questions, we're going to go through our interview, and then the latter part of the program, we're going to surface and answer some of your questions. So keep sending. We're keeping a record of them. One of the great things about this form of technology, we can have a discussion and get questions in real time. Mike, I'm going to move on now to energy accessibility.
Yes.
What would you say that the API is doing to ensure that all Americans have access to vital energy that's needed to keep our homes secure, to live in America? We're all conscious about we need energy. So talk about accessibility, because one of the problems is there are a lot of disparities, there are a lot of inequities, and so there are some communities, some people who feel that they don't have the maybe the affordability or accessibility to energy. But talk to us about what API is doing to make energy not only accessible and available to all people, but make it in a way that they actually can utilize by having the access to energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about what the rest of the world looks like in this context. There are 2 billion people in the world who don't have access to reliable energy. There's a billion people of that 2 billion that have no access to energy at all. So energy poverty is a really big deal throughout the world, but it's also a big deal in the United States. And we need to make sure that every American has access to affordable and reliable energy. As I mentioned, the energy costs continue to go down in this country, because we have such an abundance of energy. But just because cost goes down, that doesn't mean that it's accessible to every American. One of the things that we're really focused on API and my industry is focused on is making sure that affordable energy can get to every American. One of the ways we do that is through developing pipelines throughout the United States. There are already thousands of miles of pipelines in this country that take energy from where it is to where it isn't. Unfortunately, that pipeline infrastructure hasn't quite kept up to where it needs to be to make sure that we can continue to get that energy where it needs to be, particularly to vulnerable parts of our society. So we work very hard with regulators and with policymakers in Congress and in any administration that is in office to ensure that we can get that infrastructure developed in a timely manner. Because I do think opponents of our industry, what they've figured out is that they can't beat us on the supply side, right? We're going to continue to produce this kind of energy in the United States, and Americans are going to continue to demand that energy. But what they do is they try to stop the transportation of that energy in the middle. They try to stop pipelines. They try to stop trains that are going to deliver that energy because they're not for the development of American resources. So we're really focused on making sure that we have a plan in place and an infrastructure in place that's actually delivering this affordable and reliable energy to the American people as quickly as possible. But it's becoming increasingly difficult because of activist communities and groups that are really trying to prevent us from accessing that reliable, affordable energy.
Well, thank you. That's why I think this discussion is so important. Quite frankly, Mike, I'm known as an activist. I'm known as a civil rights leader. I'm known as an environmental justice leader. I coined the term environmental racism years ago in my home state of North Carolina, when they were trying to dump polychlorinated biphenyls in Warren County. But that's another story. The point I want to ask you now, and I think I want to let our viewers know, there's something called energy poverty. We've heard of that because of some of our communities are poor economically, from a socioeconomic perspective, poverty has been devastating. A lot of the pre-existing conditions that make us so vulnerable to COVID-19 is because of poverty. Also, I would say that there are social determinants to health. Right before the program started, we talked about how important it was me and you, we can get our jobs done, but we have to do it virtually because of the pandemic. And of course, in many of our communities, there's places called food deserts where we don't have access to fresh food and fresh vegetables. But now I understand there's something called energy poverty. There are energy deserts. So again, talk about how the API can help address the issue of the scarcity of energy based on socioeconomic, in some sense, maybe even racial, because a lot of our audience, we have African Americans from all over the country, as well as Latinos and other people of color who are listening to this program. And I know they're probably asking in their mind, well, we were listening to Mike Sommers, but does that apply to my community? Does it apply to my community that is experiencing all these other forms of disparities and poverty? And you really mean to tell me if I'm poor, I can have access to energy? So can you just give us a little bit more detail, Mike, about how to overcome this new term that people are using about energy poverty?
Yes, it is a tragedy that in a country that is so blessed with resources, that has so many resources at its disposal, both economic and from an energy perspective. As I said, it's the #1 country in the world in terms of production of oil and natural gas, that we can still have people that don't have access to affordable and reliable energy. It's hard enough to get that energy to where it needs to be. But one of the things that I think we've become really concerned about is how government sometimes gets in the way of providing that energy to those that need it most. Some politicians talk about cutting off the pipeline development, for example. That is one way that governments kind of get in the way. I was very disappointed with Governor Newsom's announcement a couple of weeks ago that they were going to try to eliminate gasoline-powered cars in California, as you mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, electric vehicles aren't affordable for most Americans. In fact, most Americans that have an EV, it's their third or fourth car. And these are, the richest of Americans that are utilizing these kinds of vehicles. It is the most impoverished in our country that benefit from affordable and reliable energy that's provided by this industry. We try to make sure that everyone has access to this industry and the energy that it provides. But it's hard enough to do that when politicians get in the way, it's even harder. So we're focused on making sure that this infrastructure is in place to make sure that we're delivering affordable and reliable energy to the American people. And I know that my member companies, which includes the largest oil and gas companies in the world, are focused on relieving the issues related to energy poverty, because we know that if you do not have access to energy, it's very hard to continue to advance in our economy. We're committed to it, and we need to make sure that our lawmakers are as committed to it as we are to build out this infrastructure so that people actually have access to the bounty that exists within our great country.
Well, that's a good segue, Mike. And we're speaking with Mike Sommers, the president and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute, API. Let's segue into workforce development. You mentioned earlier that the industry employs tens of thousands of people across the United States of America. I've been to some of your conferences. I've always been most impressed, and I know you do this annual address, the State of the Industry address. Tell us something about the workforce development, what currently is going on, but let's also project for the future. What will be the workforce development demands on this growing industry?
Yeah, so it is a growing industry given how much the United States has in terms of our resources, in terms of the energy that we provide really to the world. But diversity within our industry is very important as well. As Dr. Chavis knows, we have for a long time had a program here at API, which is all built on building that workforce of the future. In fact, we think it's so important. We recently changed the name to the Energy Action Alliance, and it brings together some of the best minds to make sure that we as an industry have access to the best minds coming out of our universities. This program itself has put a particular focus on STEM education. So we've tried to fund STEM efforts, particularly in communities that don't have access to great STEM education, to ensure that those students are ready to work in our industry. It won't surprise you, just like any other growing industry, that this industry has become incredibly high tech. Yes, we need geologists. Yes, we need engineers, but we also need computer programmers. We need people that are familiar with science, technology, engineering, and math. And the best place to start is at our local schools, particularly in schools that don't currently have access to this kind of high quality education. So the Energy Action Alliance is really focused on making sure that we're funding those kinds of programs. We have a joint program, for example, with Discovery Education that really focuses on making sure that these kinds of opportunities are available to students going forward. I also would say that the prospects for this industry are great. We expect that 50% of the jobs that are going to be opening up soon are going to be filled by persons of color. 60% if you include women in that dynamic. So, we expect.
So Mike, can you just repeat that again very slowly? Because what you just said, I'm getting texts from all over the place. What percentage?
We expect that 50% of our workforce going forward is going to be filled by persons of color. That is based on a study that API has produced. And we need to make sure that as we're filling the needs of this industry, that people have the education that they need to succeed in this new oil and gas world. So
give out your website again, so
yes,
people can get. I know some people can file some applications after listening to you right now.
API.org. And let me give you another little commercial on this. The jobs in the oil and gas industry pay, on average, $105,000 a year, which is almost double the national average of $55,000 a year. There are tremendous opportunities for people in this industry. But by the way, a lot of those jobs are union jobs. We depend so much on our allies in the labor community. So a lot of the jobs that are filled are represented by unions like the North America's Building Trades Union or the United Association or operating engineers. And by the way, every time I go on the road, I go to two places. I go to a school that is teaching a STEM program that we've funded, and I go to a union hall. And in those two places, I can see people being trained on API standards so that they can succeed in the oil and gas industry. And I'm able to see students, which are the future of this industry. It's a great feeling to be among our nation's youth, and then, of course, to be among the skilled craftsmen in America's building trades unions. But there are tremendous opportunities in this industry, and we need to fill these opportunities. We have an aging workforce, but we need to also train the workforce of the future. And at API and in the oil and gas industry, we're committed to that.
Right. Mike, we're having this discussion about the future of the oil and gas industry, the opportunities of the oil and gas industry from the perspective of API, the American Petroleum Institute. But we're having this discussion in the context of a devastating global pandemic, COVID-19. But we're also having this discussion in the context of social unrest in the United States. Calls concerning systematic racism. People are marching in the streets with signs, Black Lives Matter. And I would just note, it's just not only Black people marching, white people are marching, Black people, Latinos, Asians, Native Americans. It's a multicultural demand for equal justice, social justice. So connected to your commitment to workforce development, to inclusion and diversity, to making sure that the workforce represents the diversity of our nation. We are witnessing the browning of America. We're witnessing that we're becoming much more a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multilingual society. Talk to us a little bit about the commitment of API to embrace inclusion and diversity in the workforce, in the industry at large. You've mentioned with the unions and with schools that focus on STEM, but I think I know that our viewers to the program today would want to hear you say something out of the current context that we are currently living in the United States of America, facing the challenges to have a more inclusive society, a more diverse society, and to try to eliminate any vestiges that remain of racism and racial discrimination. So as we listen to you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you saying that the American Petroleum Institute embraces diversity and inclusion in the workforce?
Absolutely. And that's why I'm so excited to share this platform with you, a true legend in this arena. And I value the partnership that we've had. We've had this Energy Action Alliance for over a decade. We've been committed to this for many, many years.
Yes.
And we as an organization for many, many years have hosted and sponsored Congressional Black Caucus Fellows and Congressional Hispanic Caucus Fellows at the organization. And I view them as an important pool of candidates for when we're hiring full-time employees. But I also recognize that this is an industry that needs to do so much more to meet the challenge that have come to the forefront over the course of the last few months. None of us have done enough to advance the lives of Black Americans who for too long have been victims of systemic racism throughout our country. In response to the outpouring of people coming to the streets to trying to address this issue, API actually started a new diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative among our own staff. My view to my team was, while I might not be able to change the world, I can make sure that API as an organization, and we have 330 employees across the world, that we can do a better job of recognizing these problems. But it doesn't stop there. We also have two initiatives that we're working with our members on. One on supply chain diversity, to make sure that our supply chains are diverse and that we're working with minority-owned businesses to supply the critical materials that we need as an industry to continue to succeed, because that's a key component. We need to make sure that minority-owned small businesses are having access to our industry. And second, We have another initiative, a pilot program going on both in the Gulf Coast, where many of our members are headquarters, and the Bay Area, where there's a lot of work in this space, particularly in refining, to make sure that there's access to these jobs for persons of color, and in particular for Black Americans, because we know that this has been an issue that has been particularly pronounced among Black Americans throughout our history. I know that we can do more. I'm committed to doing more. I'd encourage you and your listeners to check out my LinkedIn page, where on that LinkedIn page, I sent a note to my full staff about the importance of this issue right after the tragedy with George Floyd. We remain committed to it. I want to, the most important thing that I've communicated to my team is that can't just be a one-off issue. We can't just say that that it's important and we're sad. We have to take action as an industry and as an association. And I'm committed to that. My team's committed to it. And I know the industry's committed to it too, because I had conversations with the CEOs of the largest oil and gas companies in the world. Think of Chevron or ExxonMobil or Shell or Total or BP. Every one of my CEOs is committed to righting these injustices that are so deeply ingrained. And my commitment, and with your help, Dr. Chavis,
absolutely.
I think we can really turn the corner as a society. But I want to make sure the oil and gas industry is leading the way.
Well, we welcome these very positive statements, not just reacting, but I sense a proactive commitment that you've just articulated, Mike Sommers, on behalf of API, and that's welcome news. One of our award-winning journalists, Stacey Brown, is making notes. He's doing a news article about our dialogue today, our very public dialogue, and we thank you again. And quite frankly, I'm just going to say this on the record, Mike. Some corporate leaders today sort of avoid addressing what you just addressed because they feel it causes controversy. But I see it the other way. I think you having the courage to make the statements that you've just asserted of the need to overcome systemic racism, the need to work together to practice what we preach, not only in your own shop, but the shops that represent the oil and gas industry throughout America and throughout the world. And these are positive things. So I want to thank you for having the courage to make the statements that you've made already. And I can tell from the social media responses, your statements have been very well received, not only by African Americans, but by other people of color, and throughout, and also all Americans. The fact of the matter is, our democracy is further enriched. Our democracy is further stabilized and grows to the extent to which we not only reach out, but we ensure that everybody has a fair chance, everybody has an equal chance to improve the quality of life. This also now goes to the next segment that I wanted to talk to you about, was overall costs of energy. Because of the pandemic, there are some people know they've got to get health care but can't afford health care.
Right.
There's some people can't afford to have the most nutritious food. I've talked about poverty, economic poverty, and we've talked about energy poverty. But what is your take on the cost of energy? Is there anything that we can do? You mentioned that we are now a worldwide producer and distributor of energy to not only for Americans, but now for people all over the world are becoming dependent on American energy. That's not a bad thing, but talk about the rising costs of energy and what is your prospect, particularly for those who are at the margins of society who may not can afford the current cost of energy.
Yeah, I mean, look, this has been an issue for us for many, many years. The good news is that as a consequence of American energy leadership and the fact that we've been able to produce more energy than this country has ever seen domestically, that the good news side of that is that affordability is we're at a point with affordability that we've never been at before. I referenced those comments earlier when We've seen all these other costs go up, whether it's housing or food or healthcare in particular, which has skyrocketed.
Yes.
It's a tragedy for many Americans when you can't get access to affordable healthcare. But energy costs, household energy costs have gone down almost 15% in the last 10 years. Could you imagine, Dr. Chavis, the conversation that we would be having if energy costs had gone up by 33% in the last 10 years?
That would have been devastating.
The economy would be in dire straits, even worse than it is today. And that's because of the innovation that has occurred within the oil and gas industry. And sometimes, I ask people this question, that if I had told you about a technology that lowered consumer costs for energy, that provided better national security for Americans, and that helped the environment, you would jump at trying to fund and put more research into that kind of technology. But that's exactly what hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling have done in this country. It's lowered costs. It's improved our national security because we're not dependent on foreign countries for our energy. And it has improved our environment. That's something that every American should be proud of. And that's what American energy leadership brings to the American people.
Well, thank you again. I want to say, Mike, this has been very informative, and we're going to turn to some of the questions. I think we have about 20 minutes left.
Great.
To roll out the hour. And one of the questions that has come in, the Black press represents the trusted voice of Black America. So Mike Sommers, representing API, what is your message to Black America today?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want Black America to know that API, the American Petroleum Institute, and the industry that I represent, the oil and gas industry, is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workforce. But second of all, as an industry, we're keenly focused on making sure that all Americans have access to affordable and reliable energy. And third, we want to make sure that that energy continues to improve the environment, that we're continuing to lessen our environmental footprint throughout the world. We're focused on that as an industry because we know that one of the biggest challenges that we face is global climate change. And we want to be at the forefront of making sure that we're lessening our environmental footprint to improve our environment and while providing affordable and reliable energy to all American people.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. Another question has come in from historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs. A number of our HBCUs have STEM majors, both in the undergraduate and graduate level. Mm-hmm. The question is, does the API support STEM education at historically Black colleges and universities?
Absolutely. In fact, let me give you a real-time example of how we do that. So I mentioned that API isn't just an advocacy organization, it's a standard-setting organization for the worldwide oil and gas industry. We actually, those standards, we produce those standards ourselves, and then they're accredited by another organization. And many of those standards are actually referenced in federal law and in state law, that if you're going to drill a well, for example, you have to follow API standards. We provide those standards for free to HBCUs, so that if you're a college student that attends an HBCU and you are interested in going into the oil and gas business, you're not learning those standards on day one when you get a job at ConocoPhillips. You're learning those standards at your HBCU so that you're prepared for when you go in there on day one on what those standards are. That's a program that we're just now premiering to address these historical inequities. And we're proud of the relationship that we have with HBCUs, and we want it to grow. Because as I mentioned, we expect people of color to fulfill many of the jobs of the future in the oil and gas industry. And we want to make sure that that people of color are prepared. And one of the best ways is through these first-class universities, these HBCUs. And if we can get them, give those students a leg up and have access to API standards on day one when they go into college, we know that they're going to be successful as they grow their career throughout the oil and gas industry writ large.
Thank you. Another question that has come in. As you prepare for your 2021 State of the Energy Address, can you share with us today what you may think would be a key point in 2021? Because it appears that, according to the questions been asked, in the context of a continuing COVID-19 pandemic, what will you forecast will be the state of the energy in 2021?
Absolutely. Well, look, as you know, as we talked about, Dr. Chavis, this is a difficult time economically for all Americans, of course. But it's also a difficult time for the global oil and gas business when, as a consequence of this terrible pandemic, demand for these products has gone down. I mean, you can't shut down the global economy. You can't when people are no longer commuting, no longer going to work. That our industry depends on demand for natural gas and oil. So as an industry, we're really focused on, we need to get the economy back moving again so that people can actually get back to work and go into their jobs, whether it's in a car or however you get to work. We need that demand to come back. The world needs the demand to come back because people are falling into poverty as a consequence of this pandemic. And there's never going to be enough money to replace what the private sector provides in terms of job creation and access to economic growth. We need to get through this pandemic as the first measure. So what I would say is the first thing that Congress needs to do is really focus on how do you get the economy back going. And you can't get the economy back going until you get COVID-19 under control. So that has to be the first priority of the next Congress and whoever the president of the United States is. I'm confident that this industry will come roaring back as soon as we get the economy back going again. In fact, based on the studies that we follow, even if the most ambitious goals in terms of that the energy transition come true, almost 50% of the world's energy is still going to come from oil and gas in 2040. World populations continues to grow. Energy poverty continues to be a main problem. And most of the time, people are going to be getting their fuel from oil and natural gas throughout the world. So I'm optimistic about the future for this industry, but mostly I'm optimistic about the future of this country, because I know that once we get through this pandemic, that we can continue to grow as an economy and as a society.
Well, thank you very much. We, the National Newspaper Publishers Association, we look forward to having a good year with API in 2021. And also, I've heard from Ron Burke that we are working on matters as we speak to end out 2020.
Yes.
I think people are looking up. I have to, on behalf of the Black press, just tell you that people are concerned about the persistence of the pandemic, and it looks like they've just announced they're going to hold off the new round of stimulus payments until after the election. So that is going to put more people in poverty. That's going to put more people in the unemployment lines. Just now, or over the next few months, are there any other priority matters that you can share with our audience from an API perspective? I know you give the State of the Energy Address in January of 2021, but we're now in October of 2020. Just over the next 3 months, what do you see, Mike, from your vantage point? You mentioned that we'll continue to be an energy producer, taking care of the energy needs of our nation, and now the energy needs of other nations. But how do you see over the next 3 months for the gas and oil industry?
Yeah, I mean, look, as long as the economy is shut down, as long as we're still dealing with this global pandemic, we're still going to be dealing with demand being lower than it should be. I mean, this is an industry that is driven by consumer demand. and we need to get the economy rolling again if we expect our broader economy to perform. And that's
Right.
not just an issue with the oil and gas industry. I think about the poor restaurants down the street that can't continue to serve when they only have 30% of their capacity. It's a very, very sad situation. So this is a broad economy issue. We will rise with the broader economy when we get this economy moving again. And I'm optimistic about that. The most important thing I think we need to focus on going into next year is how do we continue to provide affordable energy to the American people. That is something that my industry is keenly focused on. And I think that others are focused on that as well. But there are going to be a lot of big debates about energy, I expect, next year, no matter who the president of the United States is. We want to provide affordable and reliable energy to the American people. We think that we're best positioned to do that as an industry. And working with our coalition and partners throughout next year, we're confident that lawmakers will make the right choice.
Thank you. And finally, we have a question from a member of Congress office, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
Oh, great.
She represents Houston, Texas. And of course, Houston is one of the energy capitals of the world. Her question is from the Congresswoman's office, what does API have in its plans to work more closely with the Congressional Black Caucus on the nation's energy policies? And I know Congressman Bobby Rush, I think he's on the Energy Committee. I've seen him at some of your events. But and there are 55 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Just as the last question before we close out, tell us what the current relationship is, because a number of the areas that you've touched on are public policy matters. And from a federal legislation part, how well does the API work with the CBC?
I am proud of the relationship that we have with the CBC. We've built that relationship over decades, and I believe that it continues to grow. In fact, API has hosted CBC Foundation board meetings at our headquarters. We'll continue to do that. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee is a great ally to this industry and a great spokeswoman for the industry because of her roots in Houston, which, as you said, is the energy capital of the world. And we're proud of that. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, we've been a partner of the CBC for many, many years, hosting CBC fellows as part of our workforce. We've hired CBC fellows as well, and it does continue to be an important pool for us as we build the workforce of the future. That relationship is going to expand. I'm proud to say that a couple of months ago, the API Executive Committee hosted Congressman James Clyburn to address the API Executive Committee, which is made up of the CEOs of the largest oil and gas companies in the world. And it was in direct relation to the issues that we see going on in our streets today, but also about how we continue to build relationships so that we can provide affordable and reliable energy to the world. So we have a strong relationship with the CBC. I want that to grow because I know that we share the same values, which is to say we're focused on alleviating energy poverty and dealing with the key issue of making sure that energy continues to get to communities that need it most. So we have a lot of shared values that we're going to be pursuing next year, and I'm excited about building that relationship next year and long into the future.
Very good. Thank you so much. Just one last, we have a couple of minutes left, Mike. You're speaking to the Black Press of America, you're speaking to Black America. We also have a strategic alliance with the National Association of Hispanic Publications. So all people of color are interested in where the gas and oil industry is heading, and particularly you as the leader of the API, your final message to the Black Press of America, to the Latino Press of America. What is your message about how API continues to have a commitment to be engaged with these two agencies that represent the majority of people of color in America.
Yes, well, I say to our Hispanic partners, si se pueda. Yes, we can. We're an industry that is filled with problem solvers. We're an industry that's focused on the future. We're an industry that wants to continue to build a diverse workforce to ensure that we can continue to produce reliable and affordable energy for the American people. I'm excited about this partnership and this relationship that has grown over decades, and I know that it will continue into the future.
Well, very good. Mike Sommers, President and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute. On behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, we thank you tremendously for this time. You spent a full hour with us. This dialogue has, I think, also made some news, as well as shared very informative information. We wish you, Mike, and the API, and all of your colleagues in the gas and oil industry, we wish you well, and we are very grateful for the opportunity to continue to have a partnership with you as we move into a new year, and hopefully as we move into a situation where our communities can prosper, our communities can be developed, we can restore health to our nation, health to our democracy, health to our economy, and health to the world in which we live in. We thank you for your leadership, and may God continue to bless the American Petroleum Institute.
Thank you, Dr. Chavis.